Who are choosing their party over their country, and that you guys are deflecting. You don't want people to pay all to the attention that clearly the former president has indictments, state and federal, and maybe more to come.
Well, good morning, Shannon. First of all, if Jake thinks that there's no problem, if he thinks there's nothing to see here, then why not have a special counsel appointed by the United States Attorney General? Why not in this case, where there's a clear conflict of interest, where we have a Democrat administration, no special counsel set up, yet they go set up a special counsel with Jack Smith to go target the president, where there isn't one needed, where you already have an adversarial process, because they want cover for what's going on over in targeting President Trump. By the way, a question already asked and answered through the impeachment process under the Constitution. Here, my Democratic colleagues, they don't want to seek the truth. They said, oh, you're going down these rabbit trails and you don't have evidence. Well, why don't we get a special counsel, and why doesn't the Department of Justice do its job and pursue the evidence that you just laid out right here in front of him, and for which Jake had no real response other than to say, oh, no, let's focus on President Trump. The rule of law matters. And I say that as someone who voted for the electors, who did not agree with the legal strategies put forward by John Eastman and by President Trump in 2020 and January of 21. But you know what? The rule of law matters the other direction as well. You cannot use the Department of Justice to target a former president when the Constitution contemplates impeachment as the path to go down political questions. This is something that is being put up politically, purposely, this theory of defrauding, which is, by the New York Times' own description, a novel legal theory. A novel legal theory to go after a former president and the current challenger of the current president. My Democratic colleagues know exactly what they're doing.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because you talk about rule of law, law and order, all of those things. Republicans talk about that all the time. But you have said it's time to push back on the DOJ. So what do you mean by that? Do you mean defunding? Do you mean impeachment of the Attorney General? Because you know what Democrats will say, you don't like law and order when it's coming for your people.
Well, what I believe is that the Department of Justice has been weaponized. I think we've seen it in this case against the former president. We saw it against Scott Smith in Loudoun County. We saw it against Mark Houck, a dad in Philadelphia targeted for being pro-life. We should hold funding back and force changes to the Department of Justice in the appropriations process. We should hold funding back from Alejandro Mayorkas for leaving the border exposed and going after Greg Abbott for daring to want to secure the border while little girls get sold into the sex trafficking trade, as we're seeing in The Sound of Freedom. This country wants their country back. They want to believe in America again. They want to actually know the rule of law is being enforced. So we should use the power of the purse in Congress. And I can tell you right now, for all my colleagues, I will not vote for a continuing resolution or any funding for DHS or DOJ if we don't get changes to both. I want the border secure. I want DOJ restored to following the rule of law. And we should use the power of the purse. As James Madison wrote in Federalist 58, it's the most powerful weapon against an tyrannical executive branch that we see unfold right now before our eyes.
But if you take money away from law enforcement agencies, how are they better able to do their jobs?
Well, it's not about taking money away from them. It's about saying you're not going to get a blank check on September 30th without the president coming to the table and coming down to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue and sitting down and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do to restore the Department of Justice. Come down and say, here's what we're going to do to secure the border. We're going to pass H.R. 2 that we passed in the spring. We're going to get rid of Alejandro Mayorkas. We're going to pay Texas back. We're going to actually put people down on the border to do their job and actually enforce the laws as they exist. With the FBI, let's actually put a special counsel in charge of what's going on right now with the Biden investigation instead of just leaving it to the politicals to not actually pursue the facts. We can demand that because we hold the power of the purse.
Okay, I want to get to the spending, but before we leave the Devon Archer and the Hunter situation, I've read the deposition, I'm sure that you have too, not really a deposition, an interview that he had. And Democrats will say there's no smoking gun. There's no Joe Biden saying, give me this percentage or I'm a party to this contract. They say there's no there.
Well, first of all, you need to have a full-throated investigation to pull the facts out. We have the House Oversight Committee doing a great job of Jamie Comer, but that's the Department of Justice job. That's my point. We need to actually force them to do their job. Second point is, of course, there's a lot of smoke there. And I think there's actually a little bit of a fire. There's at least an ember with what you just played with the clip with President Biden saying, well, son of a you-know-what? Oh, what did they do when I held back $1 billion? The information we saw from Archer with the memo that he produced, I think, basically saying, yeah, wink, wink, yeah, my dad absolutely is involved in all this. And, proud to see that you've got, these business dealings going on. So we see information coming from Archer. We need to have a full investigation. That's why I said, where's the special counsel? They appointed one for Trump. Why won't they appoint one here where there's a clear conflict of interest?
Okay, quickly, I want to make sure we get to this. Fitch downgraded our credit rating this week, and they cite all kinds of deteriorations in standards of governance over the last 20 years. they're pointing a lot of fingers, and they say basically chaos here in Washington. You've talked about what you won't vote for with spending. There's talk of a government shutdown. Democrats on the House Ways and Means Committee say this. The downgrade is the result of Republicans' manufactured default crisis. They've repeatedly put the full faith and credit of our nation on the line, and now they are responsible for the second downgrade in our credit rating. How is this all going to play out? Because September, you got a lot of funding bills that seem to be on a rocky path at this point.
Earlier this year, the House Freedom Caucus, a bunch of conservatives, the entire Republican conference united behind a spending bill at the 2022 levels, that is to return the bureaucracy to pre-COVID spending levels. It pulls off the charts. What we have seen since Memorial Day, when unfortunately a bad deal was cut and another $4 trillion of borrowing was blessed by Congress and the president signed it, we've seen what? About $1.5 trillion of additional debt since Memorial Day. Shannon, we can't keep spending money the way we're spending it right now recklessly. We are funding a bureaucracy that is at odds with the American people. We're funding a DHS that doesn't secure the homeland. We're funding a DOJ that doesn't enforce the rule of law. We're funding a DOD that is more interested in being woke and having social engineering wrapped in a uniform than defending the United States. So my job is to hold that spending back in September to $1.471 trillion, which was the 2022 levels, and then we start getting us on a path to actual fiscal sanity. We'll get that rating back. The American people want sanity again, and that's what we're going to fight for.